The art of the Surrealist offers some of the most evocative imagery ever created. It delves into the unexplored regions of the psyche, opening windows onto landscapes of the unconscious and subconscious, casting a bright light on dark corners of the mind, and revealing realms ruled by the demons of madness, dreams, and hallucination. Surrealism often presents the utterly irrational in the most rational manner, and the resulting combination of enigmatic themes rendered in meticulously realistic techniques is arresting and often profoundly disturbing. In this section, we will take four surrealists as a cross-section of what this type of art was all about. There are others who could be equally as well deemed surrealist. There are others who had different phases of painting in their lives, and one of them was surrealism. But for the most part, this will give you an idea what the world of the surrealist was like. Salvador Dali, 1904 to sometime in the mid-1980s. Painter and propagandist of the irrational in art, he reacted against the training of the Madrid Academy and settled in Paris, joining the surrealist opposition to modern art, aesthetically and formally conceived. He flouted Cubism with an expressed admiration for the Pre-Raphaelites and Art Nouveau, painting thinly and in minute detail, and borrowing from the symbolism and analysis of dreams, with often gruesome and sinister suggestion. He settled in New York in 1939, creating a sensation with fantastic window displays and other forms of advertisement. He helped make two surrealist films. He later took to religious subjects, as in The Crucifixion, Last Supper, and St. James in Glory. These attracted much popular attention, but were regarded more suspiciously by modern critics. Girl Standing at the Window. Dali painted many pictures of his sister, Anna Maria. This is considered one of the most beautiful. Bird. This is a collage painting with sand and gravel. The bird is carrying a fetus, but instead of a bird fetus, it is a cat. Inaugural goose flesh. Dali's explanation of how he conceived this idea. I was in the act of pulling violently at the oars, and it consisted of a white shape illuminated by the sun, stretched out at full length, cylindrical in form with rounded extremities, showing several irregularities. This form is lying down on the maroon, purplish blue soil. All its periphery is bristling with little black rod-like cells appearing in suspension in all directions like flying sticks. The numbering in the picture probably corresponds to my unconscious interest in the metric system. The Poetry of America. Dali and his wife Gala spent World War II as exiles in America. From that stay he gathered insight of our country. American dynamism is represented by the two principal figures, football players, and by the little character posed on the back of one of them on the left. He is balancing a ball on his finger and symbolizes the physical vitality of blacks. He expressed his premonition of the difficulties that would arise between the black and white citizens after the war by painting a soft map of Africa hanging from the clock in the back. Christ of St. John of the Cross. Dali's most popular religious work. He said, "I had a cosmic dream in which I saw this image in color, in which my dream represented the nucleus of an atom." The picture, while hanging in the Glasgow Museum in Scotland, was slashed by a fanatic. The life of Mary Magdalene. The ample curves of the body of Mary Magdalene emerge from the cloudy whirlwinds of a stormy sky. Glimpses of sky are visible through the storm clouds. Dali from the back, painting Gala from the back, eternalized by 6 virtual corneas, provisionally reflected by 6 real mirrors. Research into the third dimension, completely controlled by the rigorous laws of perspective, plays a dominant role in the work of Salvador Dali. He was able to achieve this third-dimensional look by taking the different settings in the portrait, the mirror setting, the sitter in the middle, and Dali himself, and painting it with different color tones, setting them apart for the viewer. This portrait was left undone, but shows the genius and insight of the artist in Dali. A series of paintings by Dali without commentary. The first one, Portrait of Picasso. Hallucinogenic Toreador. Crucifixion. Spain. Shades of night descending. Self-portrait with the neck of Raphael. Birth of a divinity. Raphaelite head bursting. The 3 Sphinxes of Bikini. Gala nude from the back, looking in an invisible mirror. Tuna catch. Galatea of the Spears. Rhinoceros disintegration of Phidias. The dream. Detail. The supper. Dali and Gala, his beloved wife and favorite model, 1957. Salvador Dali in New York, 1973. Max Ernst, a German surrealist, a student of philosophy in his early days, he turned to art in 1913 and brought Dadaism to Cologne, Germany in 1919, organizing a sensational exhibition which was closed by the police. As a side note, Dada or Dadaism was a defiant outburst of poets and painters which began at Zurich in 1916 as a protest against World War I. It took the form of bitter mockery of all established institutions, including art. Its title, meaning hobby horse, being a word chosen at random from the dictionary, indicating its irrational and nihilistic character. In 1920, Ernst moved to Paris, where he was associated with leading artists at the time, and started the foundation of Surrealism. Characteristic products were fantastic works in which the cubist collage was employed to ironic or macabre effect. He escaped from a concentration camp in France in 1940 and stayed in the United States until 1950, when he returned to France. He died in 1976. The Elephant Celebes. Behind a stage floor of undefined depth and texture, we see an indication of a low-flying landscape beneath a great expanse of sky. On the stage floor stands a two-legged kettle-shaped monster with a neck and a head and a cap that seem to be made up of drafting instruments. In the right foreground is a headless, lifeless figure. Near the left picture margin stands a slender pole of unexplained purpose of function. Near the right margin there is a plant-like construction. Through the sky fish are flying. The objects are unreal, but the precision with which they are painted gives them the appearance of reality. In the artificial world of the picture, things that do not exist elsewhere become real. The picture constitutes an anti-world of fantasy and the psychic implications of such a world. The Elephant Celebes conveys an oppressive sense of monstrosity. The huge creature fills the picture in the manner of a portrait head. Nothing is alive, nothing moves, while the monster is superdimensional and huge with its bull's head. The shell seems fragile. Perhaps it is made of clay. This is bound to mystify the viewer because its objective appearance, notwithstanding, is in an utterly subjective world. Woman, old man, and flower. Two human figures dominate this picture. One, seen in rear view, has a fan-shaped head or headdress, a pierced and hollow cuirass, and arms that are mere outlines. The other figure is an old man with a convex cup-like torso. He holds a small female figure on his arm. The old man is a broken clay cup. His hair is long, his hands are large, he has no feet, and his eyes are closed. The openness of the young man's figure contrasts with the old man's introversion. The cup motif in the transparent body may have metaphysical significance concerning the interrelation of inside and outside, one of Ernst's main themes. Later, Max Ernst was to say that his frottages, that they were a means of getting rid of one's blindness. The visible and the invisible, outside and inside, should interpenetrate each other pictorially, according to the Surrealists. The Great Forest. Ernst began by applying layers of brick red and light green paint in varying thicknesses onto white canvas. In the lower half of the picture, the forest zone, dark brown and black were added with a spatula. Next, the still wet paint was scraped off with a palette knife, sometimes through several layers, until the inner structure of the forest began to appear. Then the precise outlines of the forest, of the celestial body behind it, were added in thick paint with a brush. Finally, the entire picture was worked over and corrected with paint and brush. Ernst did a series of forest pictures. He continued in the German Romantic tradition of making the landscape express subjective experience. He said in his autobiography, "He had mixed feelings the first time he enters a forest, delight and depression, and a feeling which the Romantics have called nature feeling, a wonderful elation at being able to breathe freely in the open air, and at the same time an oppressive sense of being imprisoned by hostile trees all around, outside and inside at the same time, free and imprisoned, with their confrontations of dark, impenetrable forest walls and bright rings representing the sun. This picture is a manifestation of the contrast and simultaneity of dark and light, reality and dream, threat and hope." The Joy of Living. Ernst often gave cheerful names to wrathful pictures he painted. The prototype of the luxuriant jungle, whose plants are in the process of turning into animals and monsters, may have been Henri Rousseau's jungle landscape with setting sun. Ernst himself calls the two animals in the lower half of The Joy of Living Demoiselles, referring to certain female insects that devour their partners after the sexual act. Ernst seems to be demonstrating that uniting and devouring are the same thing. The creatures in these pictures are not just living in peaceful symbiosis with the plants, but plants and animals seem to devour each other. Napoleon in the Wilderness. Ernst rediscovered several familiar techniques that had not been previously used in art at that point. One of these techniques was called declocomania. The way that this is done is you spread black gouache of varying thickness on a sheet of glossy white paper with a wide brush, then cover it immediately with a second sheet, press down lightly with the back of your hand, Slowly lift off the second sheet, starting at the upper edge as if working with a transfer picture, then replace it on the first sheet, then lift it off again until the whole thing is almost completely dry. The shapes produced by this half-mechanical method often reveal themselves as figures which can then be more clearly defined with the brush. With this process, the picture is the accidental, if not corrected or completed, result of purely mechanical process. The artist has no definite aim in mind when he starts out. To judge such works according to stylistic criteria is to misunderstand the intention of the artist. What matters most is not aesthetic appearance, but the process of creation, the method. This method is a combination of a semi-automatic printmaking process, the development of mysterious forms out of accidental shapes, and the changing of shapes into objects, of objects into other objects, or a metamorphosis. What mainly fascinated Ernst in this process was understandably the interrelation between semi-automatic processes, inspiration, and conscious completion. Having made his first experiments in 1939 while in a detention camp in France, he later elaborated and used this technique in a series of unusual arresting pictures in which female figures, animals, plants, and columns are artfully developed out of indefinite shapes. Ernst accomplishes this metamorphosis so smoothly and completely that we cannot tell whether dead matter is brought to life in these landscapes or living matter is turned to stone, whether he sees these random shapes primarily as statues or human beings, plants, or animals. The ambiguity is intentional. Next, a series of pictures without commentary. Some of them may be decipherable as to the meaning, and others will just keep the viewer wondering what in the world he was trying to relate. The first one, landscape with sun. Self-portrait. Immortality. Crucifixion. Aquis submersus. Pieta, or revolution by night. Saint Cecilia, or the invisible piano. The couple, or the embrace. Two sisters. The antelope. Euclid. Chemical nuptials. The Polish rider. in praise of freedom. Migration. For a school of monsters. Photograph collage of Max Ernst, 1920. Photograph of Ernst, 1964. Ernst in his studio photograph, 1968. René Magritte, 1898 to 1967, Belgian surrealist painter, a principal exponent of the art of metaphor in painting. He began about in 1925 to produce a new kind of pictorial imagery and was associated with an active group of surrealist painters and poets in Brussels, illustrating a number of books of an imaginative order and contributing to advanced reviews. In the last few years, his paintings have gained quite a significant following in the United States. Ready-made bouquet. The surrealist felt free to make use of any picture, whether it was taken from an advertisement, an old magazine, or a museum. Magritte's picture Ready-Made Bouquet gets its mysterious tension from the Renaissance quote, which the artist has attached to the man's back, the figure of Flora from Botticelli's Primavera. Smaller in scale than the man, this figure looks, and is meant to look, like a small-size reproduction and not part of the picture itself. The simple picture content, a man looking into the forest across a stone balustrade, is destroyed by the introduction of a graceful female figure. Besides, there is a contradiction between what the figure symbolizes, spring, and the season indicated by the forest, summer. Magritte is not altering a situation or a person into something else in this picture. He is adding a performed element to an otherwise unequivocal image. The picture becomes ambivalent through the collage-like addition. The contrast between these two elements is neither softened nor explained. It simply exists. The man in the bowler hat appears often in Magritte's later work. He is usually seen with his face turned away, or else the face is replaced by some other object. The man remains anonymous. The fact that Magritte had himself photographed several times wearing a bowler hat and a black coat allows us to regard the man in the bowler hat as a self-portrait. However, unlike most of the surrealists, Magritte abhorred all forms of publicity or notoriety. He led the life of an unremarkable, ordinary citizen. The Domain of Arnheim. The theme of the picture is the metamorphosis of a mountain into a bird. The picture contains paradoxes and incongruous combinations. The bird and its wings are part of the mountain, and yet it is a bird, though covered with snow, like the rock. The nest, with its 3 eggs, which are definitely not made of stone, indicate that the bird is real. What else are we to guess than that the bird has laid those eggs? The bird that is made of stone identical to the rock of the mountain. A blue daytime sky stands above the mountain, and the entire mountain has taken on the same shade of blue. but instead of the sun, there is a sickle moon in that bright sky. The elements of mountain, bird, nest, daylight, and moon are unequivocal, but in the context of the picture, they have become equivocal because the picture indicates daylight and at the same time insists that it is night. It shows a bird which is stone, but has laid real eggs. The oasis, the small table on which the trees are standing, unreal trees consequently, is painted in Chinese perspective, reversed and not systematized as in European Renaissance perspective. The clouds appear partly in front of and partly behind the crowns of the trees, while the distance between the clouds and the ground is too small to be realistic. Thus Majerite has altered spatial proportions here and shown that perspective is relative. In other words, he has tried to free the natural world from the rules and customs to which it is subjected by our conception of it. Through his presentation, our perception becomes intensified, while our experience of space becomes a more intimate one. There is a definite silence in this painting. In the clouds, but not on them, is a bright light, and the blue of the sky on the horizon changes colors until it approaches the deep midnight blue. The false mirror. The false mirror is a deliberate reduction of the natural function of the eye. The remarkable thing is that it does not actually look at us, the viewers of the work. This is because Majerite avoids here the eye's active function, looking, by showing only its reflective function, the reflection in the cornea of the sky and clouds. The reflection in the mirror is passive, dead, but the reflection in the eye penetrates the interior, and it is there, inside the eye, that the image comes into being. The red model, 2. The metamorphosis of the shoes which become bare feet on the gravel is evidently sharp and painful to them, and concentrates our attention on their ambivalence. They are both shoes and at the same time bare feet. Majerite has isolated these shoes' feet in such a way that they become provocative. The House of Glass. The unexpected feature in the House of Glass is the sharp reversal of the face, which is looking at no one at all, and which is of an embarrassing reality, penetrating through an opening in the skull and hair. It is not merely visible, but aggressive, as suggested by the open skull, the image comparable to a person breaking into his own house. Yet everything is painted with an absurd, meticulous mock realism, making visible simultaneously a front and a rear view, whereas in the real world the two views exist only as visible and invisible. In other words, the conjuring up of simultaneity evades the rules of three-dimensional representation, but at the same time Majerite has preserved the method of painting expected for that kind of representation, which creates ambiguity. Poison. Majerite played endless games with the mystery of space and time to which earthly things are subject. His means include the fusion of interior and exterior and the alteration of proportions. Without interfering with the shape of things, he interfered with a system of things. Poison interferes with an orgasm, a nervous system, a system in equilibrium, and he revitalized the concepts big and small. A cloud comes sailing into a room through the door, where it becomes an object casting a shadow on the wall. but the cloud also belongs to the sea and the sky outside, which are visible through the half-open door. There is an invisible observer. He might be a person supposed to be in the room, who experiences this fusion of spaces, or the painter himself and the viewer of the work. The door shows an improbable change of color, beginning at the bottom with the color and grain of bare wood and changing higher up into a luminous transparent blue that is the color of the sky above, the sea outside. The result is that the natural scene outdoors and the room indoors merge into each other, transcending any spatial contradiction and losing their individual character. At the same time, there is an inspired poetic insight from this new concept of space which defies formulation in words. The Art of Living. In the year he died, Magritte painted The Art of Living. Here an enormous balloon is floating above the decapitated body, and the balloon is the head. Inside the balloon is a very small complex of eyes, nose, and mouth, which seem mysterious, yet it is not, for it is the expression of normalized vacuity, like the ready-made suit, which nevertheless represents a human being, and hides everything that must remain secret, the small sins which convention prescribes, and the major sins which society forbids. Next we have a series of paintings by Magritte without commentary. Some of these paintings are very hard to imagine what he is trying to convey, and the only way to do that is to check out a book on him and see what the commentary was on these specific paintings. This one is entitled The Lovers. Portrait. The Lost Jockey. Time Transfixed. Memory. Pandora's Box. The Explanation. Hegel's Vacation, 1958. The Beautiful Truce. Plagiarism. Golconda. The Well of Truth. The Great War. The Son of Man. Signature in blank. Photograph of Magritte and his wife Georgette fooling around in 1928. He often used her as a model for his paintings, especially several of the nude paintings he did. Magritte holding a candle before a portrait of his wife Georgette in 1965, 2 years before his death. Joan Miró, 1893 to 1983, a Spanish painter who studied art in Barcelona but moved to Paris in 1919, being attracted by the Cubist art of his countryman Picasso. He is associated with the Surrealist developments in the School of Paris, and evolved a fanciful sign language with hints of humor. Miró, who died at the age of 90, is regarded as one of the most influential painters of our century. The Gentleman. Miró replaced words and numbers and non-objective and objective shapes, discarding all principles of composition, spatial organization, and three-dimensional definition, discarding in short the entire tradition of French painting. Miró developed quasi-automatic pictures, whose most notable characteristic is their playful artlessness. These works do not make a statement about reality, they make a statement about art. The reduction of artistic display and pretension of forms and colors to a minimum of significant elements is in its sketchiness quite unsuitable to a painting, but a cheerful, witty protest against all grandiose ideas of art. These pictures do not rearrange elements of reality in fantastic new ways, nor do they formulate any program. A work such as The Gentleman replaces the reality of a depicted object with the reality of the image itself. By thus becoming autonomous, the image offers entirely new artistic possibilities that defy all artistic convention. This is an important aspect of surrealistic art, which is not based on any one principle, but a number of different beginnings. Oh, one of those men who's done all that. Here we find a kind of aimlessness usually associated with graffiti. Informal squiggles are combined with paint smudges and an inscription. Line drawings and calligraphic logograms appear to have been thrown onto the canvas hastily and aimlessly. Its complexity has become ambiguity in Miró's picture. First, the text establishes a relationship between writing and the female figures. Second, it appears as if someone, by the way of graffiti, had written a comment on a scribble, which makes Miró not the creator of the picture, but a commentator. But the picture is not a mere sketch. It is a full-sized easel painting, and this contrast between minimal content and important medium has an unsettling effect. Its surrealist elements are the airing of subconscious processes, the enlargement of pictorial possibilities through the principle of artlessness, and the combination of writing and drawing, the ambiguity of meaning, and the stance of protest. Miró painted many different styles. Surrealist was real prevalent but he also had expressionism and modern art, and through various uses of shapes and colors and a vivid imagination, he came up with some astounding paintings. So instead of commentary on these next group of paintings, listen to the title and then you see how he got that title. The Farm. Maternity. Dutch Interior Number 1. Rhythmic personages. Still Life with Old Shoe. The Beautiful Bird Revealing the Unknown to a Pair of Lovers. The Escape Ladder. The Smile of Flamboyant Wings. Woman Before an Eclipse with her hair disheveled by the wind. The Passage of the Migratory Bird. The Birth of Day. Letters and Numbers Attracted by a Spark. Number 2. Montrage, the Church and the Village. Horse, Pipe, and Red Flower. The Carbide Lamp. Barking Dog at the Moon. Woman. Head. Photograph of Miro signing a canvas. Photograph of Joan and Pilar Miro at Montrage, 1950. photograph of Miro working on a large canvas in his studio, 1960. Photograph close-up Joan Miro. The last section we'll be taking deals with modern art. Now, some of the artists that we've already covered would be considered modern artists. They evolved from certain stages, gradually went through different eras of art, developed their own styles, and many of them in their later works would be considered modernists. To give you a better picture of what modern art is all about, I'm going to show you a series of artists and some of their works. Most of these sections are not going to be as long as we've had in the past. There will be less commentary, but we'll give you a little idea about who the artist was, his significance, and what his works were like. And hopefully after viewing these different artists, you'll have a better conception of what modern art contains. Balthus, born 1908. One of the painters who have used precise realism to create an atmosphere of the marvelous. The most fascinating today is Balthus Kowalski of Roa, known as Balthus. Born of a distinguished Polish family, his father both an art historian and painter, and his mother a painter. A quote about him says, "This painter of today, who like the old masters has become famous under his nickname, keeps to himself the facts of his private life, around which floats a halo of legend, and his confidential pictures, widely dispersed and seldom seen, have aroused both misapprehension and fascination. With a lofty delicacy and an abstinent observation of good manners, Balthus holds aloof from the trivialities of fashion and publicity." Seen as probably one of the great painters of today, and in the years to come will be looked at as one of the greats of the 20th century, is often misunderstood and misinterpreted, a lot because of the subject matter of which he portrays. Because in the late 30s, Balthus embarked on a theme that has obsessed him since: the child girl verging on adolescence, awakening to sexual consciousness and languid dreams of whose significance she is only beginning to become aware. The Street. Andre Derain. A picture like this is the type that leads to much apprehension. The man in his robe, the look on his face, and the young girl in the background leads to much speculation. The Children. Teresa Dreaming. If someone were to paint pictures of the nature that Balthus did several years ago, today in this country, they would probably be charged with child pornography. Some of the representations that we're showing are of the very tame variety. It was not uncommon for him to use total nudity with young girls. That's what made him so controversial. Frederique. Here we can see how he can capture the innocence of a young girl growing up. The cherry tree. Still life. Balthus could hold his own with any of the masters when it came to still life. The game of patience, or solitaire. He did several such pictures with the name solitaire. The Mediterranean's cat. The golden days. Sleeping nude. As I stated earlier, I'm just showing you the tamest of some of his works. That's why Balthus is so controversial, and while others see great artistic ability in him, others really look at what is his motivation for the subjects of his paintings. Detail, sleeping nude. Self-portrait, Balthus. Max Beckmann, born 1884 in Leipzig, Germany, and died 1950 in New York. Beckmann is associated with the German Expressionists, especially in America. But since independence was vital to his great individualist, he would have resisted being bound to any one group. He could do any kind of painting, portraits, landscapes, still lifes, terrifying and lovable creatures, all with equal mastery. Tragedy and humor, love and despair, aggression and harmony were all within his powers. In the course of his life, he was both an anguished victim and astute witness of those profound catastrophes that uprooted the civilization of his era. As a volunteer medical orderly during World War I, he could not prevent his pencil from sketching the horrors of the bloodbath. He reacted passionately to the cripples, the profiteers, and the prostitutes of the Depression, as well as to the bourgeoisie diversions of the Weimar Republic. The Nazis fired him from his professorship in Frankfurt and shut the doors of all German museums to his art. When Hitler was in power, he found refuge in Amsterdam, where even the rigors of exile could not disrupt his extraordinary creative output. From 1947 until his death, he lived in the United States, where he finally enjoyed both fame and happiness. He left us 835 oils and countless drawings, prints, and watercolors. The Descent from the Cross. Dancing Bar in Baden-Baden. Landscape with fishermen. Via Reggio. Greatness can sometimes be measured in portraying things very simply but very beautifully. Here is an ideal example of how greatness is carried out simply. The Loge, which is a balcony scene at a theater, makes great use of white and shadows. Rugby players. Party in Paris. Man and woman. Moonlit night on the Walchensee. Self-portrait in tuxedo. Photograph of Max Beckmann in his Amsterdam studio, 1938. Marc Chagall, born 1887, died 1985, Russian-born painter of imaginative and poetic subjects. He studied in St. Petersburg and Paris, then worked in Russia during the First World War, but returned to Paris in 1922 and gained fame for his fantasies inspired by Russian peasant life and folklore. He has been compared with such diverse painters as Henri Rousseau and Pablo Picasso, and associated with movements ranging from Impressionism and Symbolism to Surrealism and Expressionism. Yet although it is illuminating to compare Chagall with the other great painters of his age, a deeper understanding of the man himself and of the sources of his inspiration is crucial if we are to fully appreciate the spiritual characteristics of his work. In 1941, Chagall moved to the United States, where he stayed until his death. My Fiancée in Black Gloves. Adam and Eve. The Fiddler. Golgotha. Window in the Country. Lovers in Blue. The Apparition. The Promenade or The Walk. Jew in Green. The Blue House. Fruits and Flowers. Equestrian. White Crucifixion. Marc Chagall, 1915. Chagall and his family, 1917. Photograph of Chagall in Moscow, 1973. Sir Winston Churchill, 1874 to 1965. Winston Churchill was a man who devoted almost his entire life to the politics of Great Britain. He served in different capacities through World War I and as Prime Minister through World War II, being the guiding force to holding his people together as the Nazis were bombing London and the rest of Britain. Churchill is included in this group of painters not because he was such a great painter, but for the fact that here we take a man who is well known, who started painting in 1915 as a form of relaxation, something to get his mind off of the everyday cares of the world. As he went along, he progressed and became fairly adequate in his painting. So this is just to give you an idea of what a person can do in the form of recreation, not for the greatness of wanting to sell his paintings. Churchill gave away about a fifth of his paintings just to friends and acquaintances. So hopefully this will show that the average person can get great enjoyment out of creating their own art. Sunset near Rockhampton. Mimosane Lake. Palladian Bridge. Pergola at Chartwell. Terrace at Trent Park. Buddha and Lily. La Bijounage, Bruges. Lady Churchill at the launching of HMS Indomitable. Photograph of Winston Churchill mugging as a gangster with gun while reviewing British troops in 1940 during World War II. Marcel Duchamp, 1887 to 1968, French painter. Duchamp is an everlasting hero of the art revolution of the 20th century, for no matter what his age, he never ceased to embody the modern spirit. In 1913, when he was 26, he overwhelmed New York with his picture Nude Descending a Staircase, and became, in the United States, a living symbol of the avant-garde painting. When he was 80, he was still consulted as an oracle, and since his death, tribute has been heaped on him to attest of his continuing prestige. He participated in the great creative movements of our time and dominated them, including Cubism, Futurism, Dadaism, and Surrealism. Later in life, he settled in New York, and most people feel that he is one of the outstanding modernist painters of the 20th century. And you cannot understand modern art unless you understand Marcel Duchamp. Landscape at Blainville. Portrait of the artist's father. Red Nude. Apropos of Little Sister. Sonata. Portrait Dulcinea. Passage from the Virgin to the Bride. Bride. Nude descending a staircase. Sad young man in a train. Network of stoppages. Photograph of Marcel Duchamp. Hundertwasser. Born in 1928 as Friedrich Stohwasser, a boy grew up in old Vienna. He saw the old Austrian Empire crumble. It was between wars, as World War II was ending. The Germans were giving up Austria and Vienna. The Russians were marching in. Many of these things had an effect on him. At that time he was finishing up high school, and one of his teachers said he should become an artist. Got him started in watercolors, and eventually moved on to Paris and saw the new movements that were developing in abstract art. Went down to Italy and studied the old masters. Went on to Morocco, saw a different change of life. All these things were working on Hundertwasser as he was developing himself as an artist. he created the name that we see in about 1950, and he developed his own brand of abstract art full of spirals and lines and geometric shapes and beautifully bright colors, people with almond eyes, and different types of structures that the other abstracts artists were not doing. So as you see a series of pictures, you'll see someone with an entirely unique style of abstract art. Steamer and whirlpool in the garden. The green gold digestion of a cow. Eye and beard of God. Rising at noon. Mr. Winter, or winter painting. The Walker. It's not quite evident as you look at it right away, but in the lower right hand corner is the top of a man's head. On each side you can see his red shoes, so you have to look at it at that perspective of the picture. The Way to You. Notice windshield wipers and dashboard, and looking out down the road. Missed Christmas. Death of a Cover Girl. The Boy with the Green Hair. Again, this is a view from the top. Looking down, you see different sets of eyes, and also the shoes at the bottom. Rainbow House. Photograph of Hundertwasser with one of his creations in Vienna in 1985. Wassily Kandinsky, born 1866, died 1944, Russian painter associated with a modern German school and an international influence in art. He first studied law and then turned to painting when he was 30 and moved to Munich. He with others founded a group of expressionists. He painted entirely abstract fashion as early as 1910 and set out with his theory of his own abstractions, taking on geometric character. When the Soviet enthusiasm for experimental art cooled, he went back to Germany and was a teacher at the Bauhaus, then left for Paris when the Nazis came into power. He died a naturalized Frenchman, believing that painting, as distinct either from representing objects or decorating a surface, could convey profound emotion or spiritual experience. He heralded the abstract expressionist movement that was to take hold in the 50s. Improvisation. Painting on light ground. Circle within a circle. Sharp, calm pink. Untitled, oval number 2. Mild hardness. Points in an arc. "13 rectangles. Many-colored ensemble. Circuit. Paul Klee, born 1879, died 1940. Born in Switzerland but was a German-Swiss painter. He absorbed a lot from the impressions of painters of old and modern, Blake, Goya, Cezanne, before setting out in his own. He also worked with Kandinsky, and in his own words he said, "My aim is to create much spirituality out of little." The statement could also provide the theme of his relatively quiet life, a life far removed from that of the artist figure of popular fiction. Nevertheless, it gave him the inspiration for works which are exciting, humorous, charming, or full of pathos. It is as if he had access to another world of vivid images and experiences denied to the average human being. Yet though he was primarily a painter, a colorist, and a graphic artist, this was not the limit of his talent. He was also a patient teacher, a skilled musician, and a sensitive poet. New Fortress. Shrub in the thicket. Full moon. Main scene from the ballet, The False Oath. Dream City. The Order of Hitch. Physiognomic lightning. Black Prince. Figurine, the Old Woman. Brother and Sister. Friendly Game. Photograph of Paul Klee, 1912. Photograph of Paul Klee, 1940. Gustav Klimt, born 1862, died 1918. By the time he was 30, he had become one of Vienna's most successful painters. In recent years, art historians and the public alike have rediscovered Klimt, whose ornamental style combined a mastery of the human form with an unprecedented, almost oriental use of decorative patterns. The Old Burg Theater. Love. Sonia Knips. Pallas Athena. Hygeia. Fruit trees. Judith in Holofernes. The Kiss. Lady with hat and feathered boa. Portrait of Maida Primavesi. Friederike Maria Beer. Photograph Gustav Klimt. Fernand Léger, French painter. Originally trained as an architect, he turned to painting in 1903. At first he was attracted by Impressionism, then he came under the Cubist influence, and during a period of war service during World War I, he took an interest in machine forms, which became an important factor in his work from 1917 onwards. He made use of such things as railway signal boxes and street signs in mechanized composition, though in his later work he returned to human themes, always, however, with a strongly simplified decorative element. From 1940 to 1945 he was in the USA, but returned to Paris in 1945. In addition to paintings, he produced a number of lithographs and book illustrations and designs for wall decoration, mosaic, and stained glass. The Woman in Blue. Mechanical elements. The Woman in the Mirror. The Mechanic. The Water Spout. La Joconde au Clay. The Three Musicians, 1930. The Divers, number 2. Homage to Louis David. The Great Constructors. Photograph Léger in his studio, 1930. Photograph Léger, who was born in 1881 and died in 1955. We see him in his later years in his garden at his home. Edvard Munch, Norwegian painter and graphic artist, influential in the development of Expressionism. He studied in Oslo and in Paris, in his work showing a certain debt to Gauguin. It had the most effect in Germany, where in 1892 in a Berlin exhibition it caused great controversy and found response in the spiritual unease of many German artists. He left a large number of paintings and drawings to the city of Oslo. Hans Jaeger. Evening in St. Cloud. Madonna. Moonlight. The Scream. The Scream is Munch's most famous work. It is the painting which most clearly demonstrates his contribution to post-impressionist painting at the close of the 19th century, and it stands as a forerunner of the art of the expressionist 2 decades later. Anxiety. Vampire. The Red Vine. Self-portrait. Girls on the Jetty. Youth and Ducks. The Morning After. Portrait of Munch. Victor Vasarely, born in 1908 in Hungary, has made compositions based on organic and molecular structure. He has developed his art step by step and has become known as opt art. The only way to really explain it is to show you some of his compositions. Study MC. Study of material number 2. Study of Trompe el Ciel. Arcturus. Vega JG. Serving. Tridim F. Harmas. Tridim RR. Photograph Victor Vasarely in his studio. Sarle conversing with a young boy.